Welcome to the Long-Term Value Podcast, where we talk about the strategies and philosophies that create long-term value. I'm your host, Matthew Kui. In today's episode, we will be sitting down with Mathis Lasfargues. Mathis is a good friend and someone who is also very passionate about long-term value, specifically in equities. I hope you find our conversation engaging and insightful. Now let's begin. Hey Mathis, how you doing?
Doing all right. What's going on, Matthew?
Oh man, it's another beautiful day here in Miami. This time of the year is really, really nice, I have to say. But I'm kind of trying to enjoy it as much as possible before the summer comes around. How are things in Texas?
I mean, it's Texas. It's really cold in the winter and then it's really hot, just kind of depending on who even knows. These weather patterns out here. But it's been all right so far. It's been all right.
All right, okay.
Yeah.
Well, so, Matisse, my understanding is that you're pursuing a career here in finance. Do you mind telling me a little bit about what made you decide to do that?
Sure. It's a pretty long story. It honestly started way back. But yeah, I am in the process right now of getting a bachelor's in finance. I'm set to work at S&P Global over this summer. And I guess I just have to take you back to the beginning because finance was honestly something that wasn't in the cards. But so with a lot of things in my life. So I guess I have to take you back to when I first started, even like, I'm not even going to call it investing. I'm going to call it trading. It was when I was back in high school. Me and a couple of friends of mine opened like a brokerage account, you know. This was before the days of Robinhood and everything. I was on TD Ameritrade, which is
Classic.
Schwab now. And us being the 17-year-old, 18-year-olds that we were, this was right around the time when marijuana stocks, weed stocks were like kind of getting some play, some attention in the market. And so I would honestly characterize my start into the world of investing, into the world of finance as a series of lessons learned, I would say, that started shaping my worldview. So with the weed stocks, obviously, like I just held on to them because I thought like, there'd be legalization, all of that stuff. I had no concept yet of like intrinsic value or really like anything to do with any metric that you would use on a stock. I had no idea. These stocks were all unprofitable. I think the ticker symbol was ACB. It was Aurora Cannabis.
Um,
It was a Yeah, it was like a moonshoot, unprofitable play, but we were all like, yeah, dude, we're gonna be rich because of this, and we got absolutely wiped out, like minus 90% losses, with the
Brutal.
little money that we had. And then I had another wipeout with my father giving me investment advice. Like a year after that, I don't even know what it was at this point. The ticker symbol was AMJL. It was this like Credit Suisse, like leveraged, like mortgage-backed security stock. It was this weird financial instrument that actually like, it collapsed maybe like 3 or 4 years before the collapse of Credit Suisse, but it was exactly products like that actually had destroyed Credit Suisse. And so like little by little with these failures, I started thinking, like there's people make a living like this. There's got to be a better way, to go about this because right now like I'm going into these plays with like gut feeling and nothing else. No like information about it. Like I'm trusting people's like advice basically, or I'm just like with a bunch of friends going like, dude, weed is gonna get legalized. This is, a catalyst. And
it's a
so
no-brainer, guys.
exactly, like it's a no-brainer. Weed's gonna get legalized. Well, it doesn't always work like that, right? And so yeah, I thought, you know what? There's got to be a better way to this. I joined the army at between 18 and 19 years old. And I thought, once I get out of this um 6-year commitment, I'm going to dedicate my time to, I'm going to go to school for finance because this interests me. I've got, a paycheck, steady paycheck now that I'm in the army, and I want to do something with it. And so yeah, that's kind of where I started. That's where I kind of like I pointed myself in the direction of finance, and 5.5 years later, here we are today.
So all the wipeouts, and you're like, you know what? I'm back for more.
Yes, seriously, that's what it is.
What, I guess, about those experiences? I mean, you've had these experiences where things didn't go exactly the way that you wanted them to. And yet you recognize that people are making money from this. What was the connection? Why did you continue to stick in it?
That's a good question. I think what got me to hold on, honestly, I am not a traditional value investor. I think, honestly, what got me to hold on was I got lucky enough to find certain people on YouTube, actually. So one of the first guys that I started watching was a guy named Sven Carlin. People have like a lot to say about him, good and bad. But he really so just for some background for I guess like audience members that wouldn't know who he is. If I remember so he's a Croatian man that survived like the hyperinflation in the Balkans in the 90s because of, the breakup of Yugoslavia. And he witnessed like utter collapse of his financial system when he was just, in his teenage years. And he went on to go teach at I think the London School of Business for a bit, or he went there to study, and now he teaches at the business school in Amsterdam. And he's a PhD actually in finance, specifically like what he works on is valuation. He does like a quadrant style like valuation of equities. And he's the one that really kind of drilled into me that like you kind of have to like if you want to survive in the long term, you got to stay away from like high valuation stocks. You need to make sure that you can survive so that 20 years from now you're still in the game. You don't want to be like up like 1,000% one year and then have a total wipeout the next, because then you still lose at the end of the day, right? That's a zero sum game. And that made sense to me. And it made even more sense when, man, this was the period of time when I was in California. So 2020, so 2020 to 2021, I was in Monterey, California, at the language school, the Defense Language Institute. And I'm sure a lot of you may remember 2020, 2020. So 2020 was, the COVID crash, but it quickly shot back up. And in 2021, it was just absolute like tech stock mania, right? We
Hmm.
had like there were SPACs like coming online everywhere. Like it was just it was craziness, right? We
The
had
money
like
printer
stocks
go
like
burr.
yes, exactly, exactly. The Fed like didn't really know how bad COVID was going to be, and so yeah, like you said, turn on the money printing machines and the stock equities just blew up. And I watched as everyone around me, these guys that had never ever talked about stocks before, start putting all their money into GameStop, AMC. I mean, seriously, it really is like those guys that were pumping things like GameStop, AMC, they were, like privates and like corporals in the army, in the US Army that had like no idea what they were doing. And so I realized like, dude, that was me when I was 18. I would be doing the exact same thing. And I've kind of learned from my mistakes. I've seen kind of like wipeouts, and these were like I didn't pay much for this, right? I barely had any money. This was like I worked at a grocery store when I was in high school, so like it was like grocery store money that I had lost. And now I was actually like, I had like a salary, and so I wanted to do something good with it and actually compound for the long term. And so it started with Sven Carlin, and that's when he started mentioning, you know, Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger, guys that I had never heard of in my life. Seriously, never, no one had ever talked to me about them. I had never had a finance class in high school. There's no preparation, honestly, for any of this stuff. But I had always been frugal, and I had always been, I those losses had bothered me, even though like it was like a small amount of my grocery money. And so yeah, I started reading into Warren Buffett, watching some of his like annual shareholder meetings on CNBC, watching, documentaries, maybe not documentaries, but like write-ups on them from like different YouTubers. And that's kind of how I wound up here.
Wow, wow. I mean, first comment is YouTube University is super underrated. I mean, there's a lot, like, I mean, you found your path to
Really is.
the long-term value through
Yeah.
YouTube. You know, it's so funny how sort of you've landed at this in this place. My path to investing, it was also not very linear as well, and it definitely didn't start off in a long-term value type of format. I grew up in a like middle class, like lower middle class family, and parents never made too much, but they always preached investing, putting your money in mutual funds and just making sure that it compounds so that you don't lose your capital to inflation. And so I've always been a big saver as well. I like to think that I live below my means. And, you know, I mean, I went to college and I spent a couple of years working in aerospace. I'd always wanted to work for a startup because the whole idea of create a startup and you're like Zuckerberg, you can kind of create something that ends up changing the world, was always very appealing. So I never really started off in this finance world. But the thing is I would continue to dabble in it on the side. I looked at the way that my K was investing. This was a couple of years into my career. And I just thought, you know what? I can do a better job than this. And so I started to play with some of the money. I definitely got burned. So I ended up purchasing, this was back in 2019. I think the rush right before COVID, or maybe it was during COVID. I don't remember. No, it was before COVID. But I was purchasing all of these Amazon call options. And at the time, Amazon was just an absolute rocket. So I was just making cash hand over fist. I think I made like 25 grand in like 1 month just trading this stuff, having no idea what I was doing.
Wow.
And at the end of that month, I was like, I gotta stop working. I gotta do this full time. Like, this money is, I am a god. Like, I can do no wrong, basically. And then I proceeded to lose 80 to 90% of that cash over the next 2 months as I was buying things that I just had no idea I had no idea how they worked. And so that burn was, I mean, there's like a
Yeah.
psychological thing about, yeah, you know, just the ride up versus the ride down. Like you feel the losses way, way more intensely. But I never forgot about the fact that my money could actually make me money. It was the first time I was very active with it, and it had planted a seed in my mind. So I lost all this money from not knowing what I was doing, all while continuing to pursue the corporate job that I had. But I still always wanted to go and build startups. And so I had the opportunity to build some startups or to work for a couple of startups the last couple of years here. And I'm always constantly learning while I'm doing things. So while I'm working, or like when I'm not working, I listen to this podcast called Founders by this guy named David Senra. And I've been binging his stuff for the last couple of years. I just find the insights that he pulls from biographies and autobiographies to just be absolutely wonderful. I love his insights, and I've always continued to dabble in finance as well. And after the last startup that I was working for didn't work out, I sat back and thought about what I wanted to pursue next. And something that had always fascinated me, or where my mind would always go when I wasn't working, was I was always learning about these entrepreneurs and investors that really built things to last. John D. Rockefeller, Lee Lu with Himalayan Capital Management, Nick Sleep and Kai Sakaris from the Nomad Partnership, of course, Munger and Buffett with Berkshire. All these people, they've created these entities that have been able to stand the test of time. I mean, Rockefeller was Standard Oil. Standard Oil, when it was broken up into, I believe it was 34 separate companies. The companies today include Exxon, Chevron, Mobil, companies that are still around today, which just goes to show that the way that he planned and executed, he really kept long-term value in mind as he developed this behemoth that was Standard Oil. And as I'm studying Rockefeller, I'm recognizing, oh, these are the same principles that are used to build Berkshire Hathaway, that were used to build the Nomad Partnership. And I'm realizing, oh my gosh, there's like a convergence of my two worlds, like my interest in investing and then also my interest in the business world. And I realized that the commonality between the two that I found so enticing was the long-term value focus. And from that is what got me really, really passionate about long-term value investing. I'll also be remiss if I didn't mention that as I'm continuing to do all these things, I'm still investing on the side. And I ended up taking a page out of out of Nick's book a few years ago using the Kelly criterion. If you believe deeply in your allocation, you should be willing to put the money behind it. And I ended up doing so for a pick a couple of years back, and it did very, very well for me. So it was a little bit of real world experience. So all those things kind of mashed together made me realize, wow, I've experienced this thing. I'm passionate about it, and it works with my mind. Like it feels like something that like I want to just continue to dive deeper and deeper and deeper into it. And so it's just so fascinating to hear how people like we can have completely different paths but still end up in the same place or going in the same direction.
Yeah. And it's I think remarkable to note that while the paths might be honestly completely different, there are some fundamental, like similarities, I think, that just they exist for any value investor. And I think like for one, I think the foundation is that you need to be somewhat frugal, or you need to be someone that is somewhat, when I say conservative, I'm talking about someone that is willing to sacrifice a little bit of the now to yield something in the future. And I think that's something that everyone that you just mentioned had. And then I think it's something that you and I both share. I think we want great things in life eventually down the road, and we're planting the seeds now. And I think that just comes down to character traits sometimes. And then there's also a shared experience, I think, of loss in some way, something like dramatic that happens, right? Whether it be Sven with, the breakup of Yugoslavia, or whether it be, me with my like marijuana stock losses, weird, like speculative, like financial instrument losses from a Swiss bank, whether it be, the Great Depression for Warren and Charlie. Um, and I'm sure Rockefeller had his fair share of losses too before, he created his oil empire. And so I think all of these things kind of come together um, to make a unique profile that not everyone can be, I think. And I'm not the only one that like believes this. I mean, I'm kind of taking a page out of Dev Kandasari's book, who says that, the amount of value investors are in the world, they're rare. They can come, it could be 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000, maybe even more, honestly. And we know that's probably true because, these hedge funds, these money managers are full of incredibly smart people, people with really high IQs, perfect scores from some of the best universities, not just in the country, but in the world, right? And they still can't outperform, the S&P 500, for example, right?
Exactly.
And these guys are brilliant. Like truly, they are brilliant in their field. They're the guys that come out of MIT, with like a 6 year like mathematics course, to that generates like 1% more alpha for like Citadel. You know what I mean? Like this is the type of guy we're dealing with, right? So
They're the quants at 2 sigma that are, making things faster by like 4 milliseconds.
exactly. And yet most of the time they still can't perform or can't outperform the markets, let alone perform honestly sometimes. I hope that I'm not, premature in saying this. But I think you and I are principled, and I think we do fall in that category of what is considered, a value investor. And I think that's rare. And I can speak personally when I say that like you are the first person that I've met that is actually what I consider to be a value investor in my own personal life, right? So it is rare, at least from that anecdotal standpoint.
I agree as well. I mean, I know maybe one other person that I've been able to speak regards to long-term value investing with. I mean, my closest friends from college and from high school, I'll talk to them about just buying a stock and holding it, and the concept to them just it's like you can see the flies just kind of like, or like you can see the eyes glaze over
Yeah.
when they're talking about
Yeah.
it. I agree with the that loss tends to be a big part of what makes someone orient towards value investing or experiencing hardship. I mean, Buffett and Munger, they experienced the Great Depression. What's funny enough is Li Lu, he experienced severe trauma growing up in China. I think he saw both of it, like his entire family pass away, came here to the US. I mean, he ended up studying just I mean, he absolutely grinded his way through college. He just got very lucky in seeing, I think it was Munger speak at Columbia. Or no, it was Buffett. He saw Buffett speak at Columbia, and that was the thing that put him on the path towards value investing.
Yeah.
And funny enough, I mean, side tangent, but Charlie Munger, in his 99 years of life, RIP, he
Seriously.
gave his money to an outside person once to manage, and it was Li Lu. So
I didn't
yeah,
know that.
yeah, very, very interesting. But loss tends to be a hallmark of those that get into value investing. And then also there was another comment to what you had mentioned about it was the ability to save, to be frugal.
Yes.
So I don't remember who quoted it, but there is a saying, if you do not have the ability to save money, becoming wealthy is not in the cards for you. And so the bent towards being frugal is actually a huge, huge element towards that. And it can be really seen across, I mean, even Buffett as well. I think there was a story about how when one would talk to Buffett about cash, about a dollar, he was never looking at the dollar as a dollar. He's always looking at it as $20 in the future. And so
Absolutely.
there is this consistency, and it's a beautiful thing. I mean, we're experiencing this on our own in our own lives, but as our field of view opens up and as we learn more and more about the great investors and builders of history, they too have had this very, very similar mentality. Rockefeller was known for being he always had, it was called I think a treasure chest of cash whenever he would go into battle, or like whenever he would go in to acquire these companies or these other oil refiners. And so the ability to save money, to be frugal in order to the ability to be frugal in general is actually a very, very important trait in becoming a successful value investor, a successful builder of companies. I mean, you name it, basically.
No, I think you're absolutely right. It's like an innate, understanding that there's a dollar isn't just a dollar. It has potential. It's an innate understanding of present value, really, that like is lost to so many people. And when they learn it in finance, like for some, oh, it makes sense. Like I knew this. I didn't know the name for it, right? Like this is, like a dollar today is the present value of $20 in the future is $1, based on, whatever discount rate you're using. And it's something that like some people just they get that because they want to do something with it. It's not just, something that you like file away just for like a rainy day, which is good, but it's something more. You know, so something I realized when we were talking, another trait that I'm actually like identifying just now, and I kind of got this when you mentioned Li Lu. It seems like all of us, if I can even say us, like I'm not on the same level, but like I think another trait of value investors is that um, they have a mentor. They allow themselves to have a mentor. It sounds like we all had a mentor. Lilu with Munger or maybe Warren, me with like these like Sven, Carlin, you with the Founders podcast and Nick Sleep. I think it takes a certain type of maturity um to sit down after, for example, you've lost your 25K doing like call options. Like not everyone sits down and like goes back to the drawing board. A lot of people like would just keep on going and be like, you know what, the next one is going to be big. I'm going to make all my money back. Like they have this like gambler mentality, and they don't have the maturity, and honestly there's a better way to say this, but like the humility to sit down and listen from someone that's, actually done it, actually made it. So yeah, I just wanted to point that out. I think humility and the willingness to learn from someone that is successful is also a trait that is lost on a lot of people, and that is certainly common, I think, in value investing.
I'm reading All I want to know is where I'm going to die, so I don't go there. It's a book on basically there's this character named the Seeker, and he enters like this hall of knowledge or something and is greeted by a librarian, Munger, and Buffett. And they're basically, the four of them are just having a conversation. I bring this up because there is a chapter on how to live a miserable life or something along those lines. And one of the sections in the chapter talks about one way to live a miserable life is to only learn from your own experience.
Yeah.
And it's completely true. I mean, I think for most of my 20s, I was just trying to learn from my own experience. I mean, occasionally I would learn here and there from others, but it was really just, I mean, it's a lot of ego, a lot of testosterone, just kind of
Of course.
the frontal lobe hasn't been fully developed yet. But as
We've all been there.
but as we have taken our lumps and just, I mean, as well, I guess depending on if one is able to recognize when the ego is kind of speaking, there are some that are able to begin to learn from others. And just, yeah, I mean, the ability to really learn from the way that other people have done things has really just, I mean, I think it's opened both of our eyes.
Yeah. It's so funny you mentioned that because that was I threw my father under the bus with that AMJL call, and if you ever watch this one day, like, I'm so sorry because really, like, my dad is full of wisdom. And it's so funny that you mentioned that because he always told me when I was growing up to learn from other people's mistakes. He always said, if you want, you can keep on tripping over your own mistakes, and that's fine, right? Like, if you do learn from it, right? But the smartest people, they don't even have to go through that route because they observed it in other people's actions. They saw how someone else messed up, for example, and it really does seem like we learn the most from our mistakes. So he always preached, observe other people's mistakes, don't judge, but learn from it so you don't, repeat the same cycle.
Dad's gonna be happy to hear the positive one.
I think I'm good now, I'm not
Yeah.
toast anymore.
I would agree. I mean, I think one of the turning points for me was I learned about Will and Ariel Durant. They're these two, I believe they're a couple, but they basically they cataloged the entire, like all of human civilization. I personally haven't read the entire multiple volumes. They spent over 50 years, half a century doing this. They spent their entire professional lives basically just cataloging human history. And they have this condensed version of it called The Lessons of History by Will and Ariel Durant. I haven't fully completed the book, but so I'm paraphrasing here. But they talk about how when you can change the perspective of the past and not look at it as sort of a graveyard of ideas and people that have passed away, but to look at it as a celestial body of knowledge and of wisdom across the generations. When I heard that phrasing, it did something to my brain. It made me realize, you know what? There are some pretty smart people that have lived before us. And to think that they didn't have some stuff figured out is a bit, I mean, just at this point, I just can't even fathom not thinking that they had some things figured out, some things that you and I are trying to figure out ourselves. So
Absolutely.
to not be learning from them, just it makes no sense. And this coupled with Mark Andreessen, Bill Gates, Bezos, they're all known to be voracious readers, some of the wealthiest people on the planet. And what do they spend their time doing? Reading biographies, reading, I mean, financial statements, whatever it is. The fact is they're reading, and they're reading from people that have done things in the past. It's just,
They're all lifelong learners. And again, I think it just goes back to that humility concept. I think a lot of people, and you see it with, I don't want to be that guy, but like modern society today, and I think every society has been like this. Humanity hasn't existed long enough for us to develop like some like extraordinary IQ compared to like, human beings that lived, during the years of the Roman Republic. They were just as smart as us. We just live now. We stand on the shoulders of giants. And believe me when I say that these giants could even be from like the last generation. I mean, you look at, for example, companies like Micron, for example. They're a producer of memory, like a specific type of memory. I think it's called DRAM. And they've talked about, I mean, this is insane. They've talked about how if they lose a foundry in the United States for whatever reason, due to a fire or like whatever the case may be, like imagine it gets bulldozed tomorrow. They're not sure if they can build the same facility with the same capabilities. Like there's a lot of like almost black magic sorcery at this point involved in the creation of the cutting edge DRAM that's being made today. And that's just something that was built, in the last not even half century, right? So to and we're all victims of this mentality as societies. We always think that we are the zenith, we are the climax. Like medicine today is the best it's ever been, and we know everything, and science is at its peak. Like Newton got things wrong, and he's the father of gravity, right? They're like our concepts of the universe exist today, but they promise you 100 years from now they will be dramatically different. And so I love that you pointed it out as this celestial body of knowledge, of like persistent knowledge, because that if people maintain that, if societies maintain that perspective, we can move forward with less risk of losing it all, because it absolutely can happen. We are no smarter than we were 1,000 years ago. Our IQs are the same. We just build, upon ourselves brick by brick, and we stand here today after all of humanity before us has put their bricks, our forefathers.
Completely. You're talking about watching the people you're in the military with start investing in AMC and GameStop during the COVID money printing era. What about that affected you? Or what did you think about that? And kind of how did that affect your trajectory?
Yeah. So I started observing and realizing that, our mentalities are just not the same, right? Because of everything that we've spoken about so far on this podcast. And I'm starting to really get not the grasp that I have today, but I'm starting to get a grasp of it, right? And I realize that I do think differently than these people, right? Now, I don't know if I can at that point attribute it yet to some more personal innate characteristics. I think I believe that so more now. I thought maybe it was just my experiences. But yeah, I just wanted to do something completely different. So I went looking, and I found that the oil and gas industry was trading at that exact same time when AMC, maybe a little bit before, but like when I'm saying a little bit, like maybe like a quarter before AMC and GME like really started like pumping. Dude, the price per barrel of oil, they were like scratching like 35, $40.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. And if you actually like observe the oil market, you'll see that this is I love this topic, by the way. I love this topic because so you'll see that oil and gas has the equities, right? The companies follow the price of oil to a certain extent, right? But when oil really crashes, the entire industry tanks. I mean, really, you are picking up names that were like trading at like $50 a share like a month ago, or maybe like a quarter ago. They're trading at like $5 a share,
Oh my gosh, that
right?
is crazy, crazy discount.
Yeah, insane. And I will give you an example that will blow your mind. And of course, this shows the brilliance of Warren. I didn't, at this point, I knew of Warren Buffett now, or I knew of his name, but I still didn't really follow him. He was picking up Occidental Petroleum at like truly the bottom, like five, six, $7 a share. I could be a little bit wrong on the actual price. He texted his money in less than a year. Because in these points in history where really the price per barrel of oil is what is like dictating the crash in oil stocks, there's always a rebound. And so the question is why? Right? Why the rebound? This crash was also happening during, Europe moving towards being, completely energy efficient. There was this huge push because it
The
was
green,
the start of the Biden. Say what?
the green movement. I mean, just
Yes.
Thornburg, and then just kind of totally.
Exactly. Greta Thunberg, yeah, or Thornburg. Yeah, her, all of the like people in US Congress at that time that were really pushing, it was called like the Green New Deal. Oil was getting wrecked. It's just so funny to me because it's this push towards energy efficiency. It's altruistic in nature, I think. It comes from a good want to help to save the planet and things like that. But it's such a Western conceited idea or belief because no one except Western Europe and North America has the same energy outcomes than we do. If you look at and by the way, that is a measure of HDI, of the Human Development Index. It's, like the poverty line and like energy consumption. It's super correlated with how well a country is doing. Energy consumption, right? And so you've got these people saying this is it. You had like ARK Invest, Kathy Woods in 2021 saying like Tesla is going to $5,000 a share, pre-split. So like today it'd be like 10,000, right? Dude, she was insane.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Saying like oil, like the internal combustion engine is dead, oil is gone, we're going to green energy completely. It's so lost on them, the idea that like the rest of the world, which by the way, like is the majority of the world's population, right? We have 300 million people in the US, 500 million in Western Europe, and that's honestly pushing it. It's probably less, and they're facing a population wall. Like you've got 6 billion other people waiting for the same energy outcomes that you sitting in your AC, that's being powered by maybe solar energy and like geothermal if you're like in Iceland.
Probably.
It's easy for you to yeah, probably both. It's easy for you to say, oil is dead. But if you look at it, coal is on the rise, like thermal coal is on the rise in India, China, South America, Africa, right? Because they are developing countries. One day they will come up, they will come up from, not being part of really the global world order, right? They haven't benefited as much from globalization and all of that, but they will come online, and when they do, they will require power. And the most efficient source of power is still oil and natural gas, right? I don't know, I'm not saying that it always will be, but these transitions don't happen overnight, right? You don't, like Germany thinking that it's going to achieve zero net carbon emissions by 2030, right? That doesn't happen. And it's hilarious because lawmakers told them that in 2020, 2 years before, by the way, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and these guys had completely outsourced coal and natural gas production to Russia. But believe it when I say they were pipelining in all of their gas still. They were still consuming the same amount. They just weren't producing it, right? To
Um,
achieve their net zero carbon emissions. And so the thesis is very simple. And I'm copying this, by the way, from everyone's favorite green chicken. He's a serious genius on the oil and gas markets. And he says, I'm sorry if I'm butchering it, but he says every unit of oil and natural gas extracted and produced will be consumed somewhere, sometime, at some point by someone. It's just it's like gravity to us, it's
mm,
it's just a fact of the matter. And so he also argues that, renewable is an additive layer to our base of fossil fuels, but you cannot replace it, especially not
not now.
not now, not in a period of 5 or 10 years. These transitions take way, way longer. And so once you understand that, you can start, these dips come very rarely, honestly. Like in the last 30 years, it's happened maybe 4 times where the price of a barrel of oil like shot down by like a massive amount, like more than like 60, 70%.
Mhm.
But when they do, it's an amazing time to buy. And so to circle all this back, when people were buying AMC and GME, right, I was buying Schlumberger, Suncor Energy, and I thought, silly me, I thought Chevron was too expensive. Little did I know Warren Buffett was buying Chevron at that time. I thought it was too expensive. And there was another one, I forgot, but basically the core holdings really were Suncor Energy and Schlumberger. And I got phenomenal returns from it. And it proved to me that like you don't need to follow the hype. I didn't get burned, right? And I was buying things at like valuations that actually like made sense. And that frugal side of me was like, okay, I'm buying something that, clearly is cheap right now, but if it's just dependent on like the commodity price, it'll probably go up. I mean, I drive an internal combustion engine car. I'm not buying like a Tesla anytime soon. And I don't think a lot of people are. So that's kind of, I hope that answers the question. I know it was, again, another tangent, but I think it's
No, all
really
good.
interesting, the oil and gas market.
I think you illuminated a couple of very interesting insights there. We ran into connectivity issues shortly after this. It just means we'll have Mathis back on for a future episode. I hope you found our conversation engaging and insightful. Take care, and I'll talk to you again soon.